Hi everyone, welcome to the second episode of Math and Beyond, an this podcast. Today we are going to talk with Tim Kamsma from the University of Utrecht. Tim has achieved his master degree in theoretical physics at the University of Utrecht, indeed, and he's now pursuing a PhD studies in neuromorphic computing, which is also the topic of today of our discussion. So that's a little introduction of Tim. Now I'm going to send him the invite, and we are going to wait for him. Hi, Tim.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Doing fine. There is a little bit of sunshine, so it's always appreciated in the Netherlands.
Yeah, though we also had some rain today, so
typical Dutch weather, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, so I made a little introduction about you before, and I said you obtained your master degree at the University of Utrecht in theoretical physics, and you are now pursuing PhD studies, and in the topic which will also be the topic of our discussion, which is neuromorphic computing. All right?
yes, certainly.
Oh, okay. So I would say we can jump into it, and I would like to ask you, what is this let's say apparently fancy word which is neuromorphic computing? Why does it differ from traditional computing?
Yeah, so neuromorphic computing is indeed a bit of a fancy word. It's a term for brain-inspired computing devices. So that's where the term neuro comes from. And it differs from conventional computers in quite a significant way. So as you surely heard, that conventional computers use ones and zeros, basically to process information. And that ultimately comes down to the fact that they also use transistors. So basically tiny switches, which can turn a current on or off, so 1 or 0. And this works tremendously. These bits can make, with this sort of type of digital computing, we can make all the computers that we have as of today. However, our brains work on a fundamentally different basis. They are made of a network of neurons, which can communicate to each other in analog ways. So there's not just an on or an off state, but they can also communicate intensity with each other, which is really different. And they are connected in a network that we don't completely understand yet, but we do know that it is really different than how a traditional CPU core works. And neuromorphic computing takes inspiration from the brain and tries to work that into an artificial chip to try to harness the power of our own biology for computational purposes. Okay,
but why are we interested in these let's say different chips, in these neuromorphic chips?
Yes, so there are multiple motivations to pursue this topic. The one you will hear most is energy efficiency. So we actually do not often realize that our current consumption of computing devices is taking a huge toll on our energy budget. So currently, I think the estimate is that roughly 10% of the global electricity budget goes towards computing devices, and this is increasing exponentially, especially the consumption of AI. Energy resources spent on AI software and hardware.
So when we are using ChatGPT, we are polluting. We can say it.
Sorry?
When we are using ChatGPT to do our coding assignment, we are polluting. We can say it.
Yes, definitely. So just ChatGPT alone, which is now sort of only in a pilot phase, this is an estimate, but basically consumes enough as much energy as a small city in a developed world would. And that is just one very advanced but glorified chatbot in essence. And that sort of those types of numbers, those are only increasing very rapidly, and that is simply unsustainable. And that basically is the reason why that energy consumption is so fast is because the sort of the computers powering those programs, they can easily gobble up millions and millions of watts while they're running. But your brain is also in many ways still supercomputer. You are unparalleled in many tasks you complete, but you do it on a peanut butter sandwich and a banana. So the energy budget of your brain is roughly 20 watts. So that isn't like a few percent difference or maybe a factor 2 difference, but that's like a factor 100,000 difference between the supercomputers, and you're still better at many tasks than those supercomputers are. So now, and scientists now looking at that, so why can the brain do this so much more efficiently than our computers? And then you ultimately end up at a brain-inspired chip to sort of try to curb the trend of unsustainable energy consumption.
Okay, but then how, let's say, what are the key components of this neuromorphic computing system, and how these components do work together to achieve more energy efficient computing and compared to the computers we have now, so the traditional architectures?
So there are a few ways where a few areas where you can point to where this difference comes from. A very key difference in the overall architecture is that your computer has a so-called von Neumann architecture. So we have a processor, the chip that does all the calculating, but all the information that processor uses is stored elsewhere. So in the memory or in the storage and a little bit on cache, but basically they are explicitly separated. But in your brain, even though there might be regions which are more associated with memory and regions which are more associated with other tasks, they are all connected in the same network. And that's what we call in-memory computing. Basically, there's not a processor unit and a memory unit, and there's a bridge between them, but they're all sharing basically the same architecture. And this bridge between the processor and the memory, this is called the von Neumann bottleneck, is what many people point to, which is sort of a limiting factor, hence the name bottleneck, for traditional computer architectures. So that's one of the things people are pointing at. Now, so that's a bit more on an architecture scale, so an overall architecture scale. On the more like microscopic scale, we also need some fundamentally different devices. So I already mentioned that your computer uses transistors. There's basically tiny switches, so they can switch on or off. Those are the binary state is not suitable for brain-inspired functions because your brain does not work on this binary system. So what we typically use, what is a very fundamental component, are memristors. Memristors is a sort of a name for a memory resistor. And basically what that means is that it is a resistance which can remember its past states. And I won't go into the details of this device, but basically what people found out is that this actually shares a lot of similarities with synapses, so the connections between neurons. And I should also say, by the way, you don't necessarily need these memristors. You can also use analog transistors. So these are sort of transistors that you can turn a tiny bit on or a tiny bit off. So not completely on or off, but also states in between. And those can be made to have the same functionality as these memristors. But we need something that can emulate a synapse, so that the connections between neurons to basically emulate neuronal processes. Okay,
and what are some difficulties, some challenges that we are facing in designing and also implementing this new, fundamentally, as you said, fundamentally different computing systems? And how are you and generally research around the world addressing these problems?
So there are, of course, lots of challenges because it's a relatively young field. So I think even though the sort of the theoretical concept of the memristor and hence also like the neuromorphic applications it might have stem from the 70s, but only like in 2008 did HP actually sort of construct the first like experimental device. Well, they might not have been necessarily the first, but it was the first where they really had like a device which could be used for neuromorphic purposes, and they realized it. But challenges remain that these devices are unpredictable in many ways and not optimized. So on the device level, there's still much work to be done, although there is already, indeed, this is a little bit over a decade, a vast family of different memoristic devices to be used.
When you say unpredictable, what do you mean?
So what you want, if you're building a computer, you want basically, if you give it the same input, it should give exactly the same output each time over again. Because if you, like a computer does operations literally on the order of billion times a second, and you also eventually want to reach those speeds in neuromorphic chips, of course. And if it does like a different thing 10% of the times, then it goes wrong really, really often. And one challenge of many devices that they want to make sure that every time they do the same thing with it, it actually also gives the same output. But that's not necessarily guaranteed. That we might take that a bit for granted in modern hardware. But there are all sorts of random fluctuations in systems which might prevent that. So that's one of the challenges.
We find quantum fluctuation even in neuromorphic computing.
Yeah, not necessarily. Well, I don't think neuromorphic computing is necessarily yet on the level of quantum fluctuations. That's actually a bit of a problem now for conventional computers, as transistors are literally a few atoms big, and then quantum fluctuations do really matter. No, but you can also just have normal noise in your data, stemming from all sorts of different sources, defects, film fluctuations, just random stuff which no one can really explain, and you want to really try to minimize that as best as possible. And also, of course, between manufacturing different devices, you also always have some manufacturing errors. And also, well, the brain is really, really complex. We don't really know how it works yet. We have some understanding on some levels, but really as a whole, we have this is really tricky. So building something like the brain is then also a huge challenge from a neuroscience perspective. So there's also a huge sort of communication bridge within the neuroscience community, and goes in both ways. So neuroscientists also use sort of these neuromorphic investigation, try to learn more about actual neuronal architectures, like what parts are important for which tasks.
Okay, but this sounds all very cool, but tell us, why do we want to care really about neuromorphic computing? What are real applications that we can apply this topic, this subject, neuromorphic computing to, and what are the benefit that we can reap from neuromorphic computing?
I think there are like a few different levels of looking at applications. So what nice thing is that there are already a few concrete examples. So like the big chip manufacturers like Intel and IBM are actually already in the process of releasing or already released actual prototypes, like actual chips people can use. A area which people are really looking at is so-called edge computing, and this refers to
edge, okay,
like computing on the edge, and that is a term which refers to devices that are not connected to the power grid. So, for example, a car or a drone, those types of devices, where your power budget is a really crucial factor of how you use the device. And an area where we see really rapid development, for example, is self-driving cars. But if you want a really good self-driving car, then you need to process a huge data stream. There are lots of inputs, cameras all around, lasers, and you need to analyze that as well, and all in real time. We can do that quite well already, but hooking up a huge graphics card which consumes 400 or 500 watts to your Tesla is not very well for you. It's not very good for your driving range. People are looking at like a chip that can do it much better and also much easier in real time. Looking at neuromorphic applications. For example, I know for a fact that Volkswagen is explicitly looking at these sort of revolutionary type of chips, but there are many more applications, and that's really sort of on the horizon already. I think if you be a bit more speculative, then looking further down the line, like actual devices that can either interface with the brain. So that's something which I also am a bit more interested in, or devices that can really sort of accelerate AI for the towards the general public, to make it accessible for everyone without having to use a small power plant to power each and everyone's computer. So that's
basically for those geeks trying to complete the coding assignment with ChatGPT, they should also be interested in neuromorphic computing. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because we all also know that everyone who has tried to use ChatGPT, who has not got the pro version at least, knows that they will have been locked out a multiple number of times because they've been overloaded. And one of the huge sort of limiting factors for ChatGPT, I believe, or not maybe limiting factors, but something which is costing them a lot of money is the actual energy consumption of their servers, because I said the estimate is that it consumes much as a small city. Well, the power consumption for a small city is quite a lot of money. So that is also one of the things why there might be some growth pains in ChatGPT. Though these are all sort of speculations. OpenAI is, of course, understandably rather secretive about these things. But the idea is indeed, hopefully, that the sort of the advancement of AI can first of all be sustained, because, of course, barring any sort of ethical or maybe sci-fi type worries, AI has brought a lot of good things to society. So we can sustain that development, but also, enable it to be used without having unsustainable power consumption for the general public as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was also wondering, given what you told me, the estimates about the consumption of ChatGPT, are they even breaking even with the ChatGPT Plus subscription, or or are they making a hole in the balance sheet of OpenAI?
Could you maybe repeat that? You broke up a bit.
No, I said given what you told me about the estimate of energy consumption of ChatGPT, I was wondering whether they are breaking even with the monthly subscription of ChatGPT Plus, or they are just digging holes in their balance sheet bottom line.
Yeah, so I think they are not making a profit currently on ChatGPT, but of course they are receiving huge investments. And I guess also their point with the reason why they made it available to everyone is because basically they're crowdsourcing their development. It's very impressive. ChatGPT 3, the sort of open source one, I believe was. But there were of course some mistakes still in it, and they very effectively managed to fish those out because they released to the general public. But I don't think they are. I think they're spending huge amounts of money trying to keep it up. Indeed, yeah. So I guess their balance sheets are balanced by some people actually pumping in a lot of money into this company.
Do you believe it will either ChatGPT or maybe some other large language models, will they be available for the public for free in the future, or will they start let's say being more sort of exclusive? I mean, not elitarian, but at least accessible only through, let's say, a subscription or a payment or whatever it is.
So it might be the case that there are like paid versions at least. I think some forms will always be, from this point onward, be available for free. That is simply, if you don't do it, someone else will, I think. So I think people should always realize that if something is free, something else is paying the price. And if you're not paying, then you're using the product itself. So if Google releases their AI for the general public for free, then they're not doing it out of the good of their hearts. So I can, of course, not speculate on whatever their motivations are. But I think, yes, the more AI will advance, the more it will also be available for free, because basically you have to, because someone else will also have released it for free. And there's also, I mean, all these sort of ChatGPT things are very impressive, but there are also a lot of open source AI projects, and scientists also tend to release their research open source. That is people who are not being paid by a company, though I think for AI purposes, actual like industry has taken over from academia and developing new AI. So yeah, I think it will be available to the general public from this point onwards.
Okay, so coding assignments are safe so far. Yes.
Yeah, and that's something which we, so you hear some people, okay, how can we prevent students from using ChatGPT? While of course.
Exactly. What do you actually think about this? Because sorry, I just very quickly on Twitter, it went, let's say, sort of viral, an image of like from 1980 of professors protesting with like papers, boards saying ban calculators, students must compute with their mind. And now they are saying ban ChatGPT, we do not want. That very small parenthesis. I am Francesco. I am from Italy. I don't know if you have heard this. They have banned ChatGPT in Italy. Fortunately, I still can access it from the Netherlands. But
yeah,
what do you think? Will it be eventually, let's say, sort of implemented in, say, school system or something similar? Or
yeah, I think there is no choice in there. You must. It's not going away, and it's only going to get more integrated into society. And you need to be reasonable with this. Like with calculators, we haven't completely abandoned learning children how to calculate with their head. Everyone has some base level of calculus skills, but I'm not doing a very complex square root on the top of my mind. I'm using my calculator for that. Because a calculator is an amazing tool, and it accelerates a lot of actual makes room for a lot of other things. And I think ChatGPT will be the same. We have to, I mean, people will also, like, writing is, at least for now, is still a basic skill, but ChatGPT is an amazing tool that can also help us along. So this sort of these scared things, I never go along. These scared reactions, I never really go along with them. I think, yeah, you have to learn how to work with them, and sort of protesting or saying, oh, we cannot really teach anymore because ChatGPT's everything is counterproductive. I think you have to accept it's here now, and students are going to use it whether you want it or not. So make sure that you can have a reasonable curriculum where you also embrace ChatGPT. I mean, it's not going away. So there's no use in trying to shield people from using it.
Yeah. How I'll say I made a small reasoning about it, and I reasoned over the fact that, okay, 100 years ago there were not calculators, so if you wanted to compute, if you wanted to do calculation, you needed to do I'd say mind hard calculation, and you needed to get better at that. But that coming with coming of calculators, that, let's say, the calculating skill got a little bit lost, as you said, not completely, because we are still taught how to mind, calculate operation and whatever. However, it is a skill that, and I believe for many other, I would say, skill that ChatGPT, I mean, artificial large language models can, as a sort of help in. There will be skills which will be, let's say, always less, let's say, paid importance and attention to, because they will be implemented by what technology has given us, as mind calculation has been supported and implemented by calculation. So that is why, and of course, in computer science and or mathematics, students will still be taught how to code, how to program, how to make classes and use programming languages. However, there will be, I would say, it will be approached, I would say, this is sort of a hard analogy, but it will be approached in the same way as, let's say, mind calculation. It is approached now with the calculation. Yes, it is important. You need to know it. You need to understand it. But you know that there is a very efficient and very important tool. So make use of it and understand how the tools work.
Yeah,
That is how you also develop. How you advanced.
Yes, no, I certainly agree with it. Though there is one, so you say understand how it works, and there is actually that's the only sort of argument I can get behind where you have to be a bit more careful with this than with calculator, for example, is that these sort of large, deep networks and complicated machine learning models that we use, they are black boxes. So we do not know how they work, and we do not know how they come to the conclusions. We can. So the people who actually make them, of course, some idea probably, but they are actually completely black box. That's the point of machine learning, right? We don't write the code. We make a machine write its own code. Is effectively what we're doing. So that does mean that there is a disconnect between what we understand is happening and what is really going on behind the scene, and that's of course quite a qualitative fundamental difference from like previous advances, like for example the calculator. Like if my calculator does a complex square root for me, I understand very well what it's doing. It just does it way quicker than I can. But if I ask ChatGPT to write like a complex piece of code or a letter or something, it's not clear to me, and it will never be, and this will only get worse, how it has come to that conclusion. There are also lots of people working on trying to deal with that. That's actually sort of a huge subfield within AI, trying to make AI explainable and make sure that it sort of that someone can take responsibility. Because this AI is also being used in ChatGPT might seem a bit more innocent, but it's also being used in setting like how much money people can loan from a bank, for example. Those banks also use AI algorithms, and those decisions have very real consequences for very real people. And as a certain banking crisis might have learned us, it can really be dangerous if we don't know what the algorithm is doing behind certain financial decisions. So people, there are sort of very legit worries, but barring those legit concerns, it's not going away. So instead of being scared of them, we must really learn how to work with them in a reasonable way.
Okay. Yeah. So a small digression on on ChatGPT, but coming back to neuromorphic computing.
Equally interesting discussion, by the way.
I'm happy about that. What are the latest development, the latest advances in neuromorphic computing, and if these advances is this recent development, how and if they have been able to, let's say, improve performances with regards to efficiency compared to indeed our traditional computing architectures.
Yeah, so I think rudimentary chips are now actually hitting the market around this time. So it is actually like happening, not really. It's not just speculation anymore. And these are like more efficient. I don't have any like explicit numbers ready, but I believe I've seen factor 100 or a factor 1000 pass by of efficiency improvement on like actual tasks. Though these are marketing numbers, so take them as you want. But they are here, so that's sort of where we are now. For the future, people are actually now looking at further sort of also different processes of processing data. So most chips actually in some way try to build a artificial neural network on a chip, so a hardware-based neural network. But your brain uses spikes, so it sends all sorts of electricity spikes, and it can do this with certain frequencies, and those different frequencies mean different things. And there's also a software equivalent of that called spiking neural networks. And people are now also looking at how to make sort of physical spiking neural networks, that we actually have a chip where we send spikes instead of some certain input value. So we code it as really temporal data, so time varying data. That's something which people are looking into a lot now, which I believe also the Intel processor. So Intel also has a prototype neuromorphic chip they're using spike neural networks. And what I think is very exciting, at least from a physics point of view, is really trying to use different types of materials. So most of the people that are actually building chips now are still doing it with good old semiconductors, because that is a very, very, very well established industry. But there are also people looking at photonics, so using light as a signal carrier instead of electrons. And I personally am also interested in using the biological medium of, so your brain uses water and salt to conduct electricity. And that also is fundamentally different than using semiconductors or electrons as signal carriers. So I think also from a physics point of view, there's lots of interesting development actually sort of trying to explore really completely different media to process in.
Okay, how do you think, let's say, how far can we, let's say, advance in the short term with regards to, as you said, carrying the medium for carrying electricity? You said you have been investigating our brain. How does it carry with water and salt? Do you think it has any, let's say, short term application that we can implement, or will we be, let's say, dependent on traditional methods as we have been for the past years?
I think so. The more you zoom in on specific mechanisms, the more you also be sort of confined to certain applications. So with the respect of the actual biological media of water or aqueous solutions, then we are really more at the fundamental stage of exploring what is even out there. So there are literally hundreds or even maybe thousands of different paper doing the semiconductor memoristic devices, and a handful of very, very recent papers looking into these more biological media. So it is really like much more at like the start of trying to explore what's even possible. What is interesting in the future is of course biological integration. So these types of devices literally use the same medium as your brain does. So they speak the same language and respond to the same signals and can exist in the same environment. So biological integration is interesting. And also there are a few things which your brain uses, which are unique to these types of environments. Also chemical reactions are now possible. So your brain really heavily relies on using all sorts of chemical regulation. That's simply hardly, or maybe not at all, possible within these sort of solid state devices, because solid states, as the name might suggest, solid, nothing is free to really move around to some extent. And but within like water and salt environments, so aqueous solutions, you can also have chemical reactions. So that's also now something you can emulate, which is also something people are starting to look at now. So this chemical regulation is something the brain is using, which we cannot do yet in these solid state devices, but we can do in these aqueous devices. However, applications are sort of, for computing applications, are maybe a bit more in the future, though not very far in the future. We are working on it.
Okay, now I would like you to speculate as hard as you can. What do you see? Which direction do you see we can? You see that we may undertake in the future, and let's say related to these directions, what will be some, let's say, main benefits that society as a whole may reap from this research, which is your research indeed?
So if you're really going down speculation lane, then I think this will the sort of the magical so-called lab on a chip is something which is of huge interest.
A lab on a chip.
Lab on a chip, so laboratory on a chip. So right now, if we want to measure something or process some biological data, especially, you have to extract the data and then input it in a computer, and then the computer will start calculations and will output something that has to then be analyzed probably by humans. What I hope we can do, if you, for example, have a computing device that lives in biological environment, that it can analyze biological signals without leaving that environment and using really efficient method of computing without so also not needing to be connected to some heavy battery or something like that, and then being able to detect malicious health signs like malicious cells or like heart problems with brain signals, all sorts of biological signals which we really have to analyze now, which can then all be like imported, analyzed, and outputted on a single chip, i.e. a lab on a chip. So that's a sort of a concept. That this is really speculation lane. So lots of people are trying to build certain labs on chips, but that is something which is really cool. And even further down the speculation lane, trying to leverage sort of this fundamentally different way of computing that is enabled in sort of aqueous solutions, where you can use different ions, different chemical regulations, different geometries, many different response timescales, so memory timescales, etc., to enable a different type of computer architecture that we simply cannot straightforwardly emulate on silica. So the sort of the regular hardware that we're using now. So those types of things, but those are of course in the distant future, I think, for now at least.
Okay. And do you think that, do you believe that if, let's say, our computing infrastructure gets, let's say, sort of shifter in who knows which future, but do you think that if this gets widespread, what consequences can it have in society? Meaning they will not only be implemented in the special computer that government or high-tech companies are using, but everyday computers. So this is clearly very speculating, and also but much in the future. But what can be the consequences? The consequence of something like this? Because my vision is okay. Let's say embed myself in the person of 200 years ago, where he was discussing with some mathematician talking about let's say the very basic maybe 100 years ago, talking about the very basic structure of a computer, and he was imagining think about all the things that we could do if this was widespread among population. So now I ask you, what if we make a further leap and this gets widespread and among population?
So I think for neuromorphic in general, it's going to mean basically that we can have sort of very extremely advanced AI in everyone's pocket. I think, and it will develop in parallel with also the normal, sort of the conventional semiconductor industry. So normal chips that we have in our computers and our smartphones aren't going anywhere. They're not going to be replaced, at least for now, by the chips, but they are going to work heavily in parallel with one another. So I think AI is going to really be accelerate. And sort of speaking, sort of maybe 100 years from now, from like my sort of my branch of the research, for now at least, that communicating or interfacing with the brain is effortless. So the brain is not a mysterious organ anymore, but we can interface with it, fix diseases with it. People who are blind can now basically have surgeries where, without having a complicated solid state device in between, it can now be interfaced with the brain to have them give them artificial vision. And this is now all sort of effortless, basically. And right now, interfacing with biology is really difficult. Not impossible. So of course we do have certain devices that interface with your biology, especially with the heart, but it is difficult. So those types of prospects, if you really look back 100 years in the future and I think and hope for a giant leap, are what I would hope for to happen. So artificial computing is completely So really advanced artificial computing is becoming accessible to everyone, and also in interfacing with our lives much easier.
Sounds, yeah, sounds very exciting, though a little bit into the future, but we never know.
Yes,
So
that's definitely, of course, a huge part. And then, of course, different branches research is how to actually make sure this all happens ethically and safely, and make sure that we don't end up in a dystopia, but in a better, more technologically enhanced future, which I'm optimistic about. I never really try to, never really want to be as depressed as some people tend to be about AI.
about dystopia and artificial
intelligence. Although there are legitimate concerns, of course, I always think that there are lots of people should be working very hard to also explore the sort of the more concerning angles of this. But I think overall, AI is so far bringing more good than bad, but we should really keep working hard to make sure that trend continues, and we don't end up in a certain dystopia.
Yeah, with regards to the dystopia, I have a very small suggestion for whoever is listening. If you are texting with ChatGPT or Bard or Bing AI, after a response, always thank him, so that when they will take over, they will remember about you.
Yeah, I also always do this. I always say, could you please, could you do that? It's AI, but it's just, it feels bad to just give it orders.
Yes, remember about that. You never know how it will turn out to be. Okay, but very small last question. What do you suggest if there is, I would say, any student, I may say computer science student, more related, who is interested into this kind of topic? How do you, let's say, what are the paths that one can undertake, one can take to reach this topic of research? This topic of research.
So there's also, from a computer science perspective, a huge sort of interest into this region, because I'm sort of the more on the hardware side of things, so the physics of these devices. But as they appear, these devices, we also need new software for them, basically. So also from a computer science perspective, try to really sort of read into the completely different software architectures and also system architectures that are required for using these devices. This is, of course, not really my expertise, but there are actually, because this becoming a bit more mainstream, there are also a few just very accessible resources also on YouTube, just to get a grasp of what's happening here, and then try to really understand what's happening there. I think if you have some knowledge on neural networks, then that's a huge benefit. So once you know how a neural network works, and of course that's a huge family by now of different machine learning algorithms, then that's really a fundamental step of understanding how these devices are supposed to work. And I think that's accessible to basically any computer science student. Machine learning course and machine learning information, I think, is quite standard by now to learn in computer science.
Okay, very interesting. Then I will leave you go. Thank you very much for this talk. I think it was very fascinating. I believe it is always very intriguing to, let's say, take a let's say a hypothetical leap 100 years, 200 years into the future from now. And it is just speculation, but you never know. Maybe it may turn out to be true. We very well be in our graveyard, so we ain't gonna be able to profit from this, but hopefully maybe. So thanks a lot. Thanks, Tim, for being with me, and thanks for listening. For whoever is listening, thanks for being with us.
Yes. No, thank you for having me, and hopefully someone who listens to this now also gets interested in this topic.
Absolutely, that's what we hope. So I will wrap it up here. Thanks. Thanks for being with us. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the future episode. Yes.
Bye-bye.